Let's make an Uptown wreath using the 248 evergreen wreath from Walmart. You can also grab you some of the mesh ribbon you may have gotten from Dollar General. This wire mesh is beautiful at Thanksgiving, and the plaited ribbon from Walmart in the Christmas section. Grab you some pipe cleaners and cut you off some 3-inch size so we can wrap and tie things onto the wreath, at least 16 ties. And then you'll need some elements. I got these barns and the panel wagons from Dollar General. And then I secured me one of those beautiful deer from Dollar Tree. You could use various elements to make it beautiful. So fluff your evergreen wreath up and out, up and out. And the first thing we'll begin with is the plaited ribbon. There'll be a nice start to weave in your wreath. Allowing the first 2 inches of your ribbon excess, and then just start anywhere on your wreath and tie it down with your chenille stem. This will be your very beginning, and you want to do just a single tie because you'll be tying back to it. Now, giving yourself like a hand width, that's really around 5 inches. Gather it together and that 4-inch hooped up and tie it down. When you get this into position, you'll be billowing, and think of your wreath like in 4 parts. So about every 4 inches, you're going to have a hoop and you're going to be tying it down. Once again, do the same thing. Allow about 5 inches pulled out from your reel, push it back, and then tie it in. This will make those natural billow hoops all about your wreath, and you'll do this all the way around. Once you get back to where you started, pull your ribbon just beyond that beginning to the next hoop area, middle ways, and then cut it. That will give you that 2 extra inches. Now you'll take and just fold under about a 1/2 inch to an inch, gather it together, and then you're going to tie it in the beginning with the same piece of chenille stem. We'll also be beginning the mesh wire wreath ribbon in the same spot. So here we are, we've got our mesh wired ribbon. We're going to gather that first 2 inches, bring it together, just kind of fold it, and now we're going to tie it in the beginning and the end of our first ribbon. Once you get this into place, just give it a single twist because the tail of it will be tied back at the same spot. Now for this one, you're going to go just beyond your first hoop to middle ways of your second, and then push it back and tuck it in the center area underneath that very first loop that you left. When you get this tied into place, you'll do the same thing. You'll stretch your wire mesh just beyond to the center of the tie down, then push it back. So that gives you that good measure. And then center ways of your previous ribbon, tuck it underneath and tie it. You'll do this all the way around the wreath. And once you get there, you'll just tie it underneath, tuck it under. This will make those nice billows. Now we're back at the beginning again. So now stretch it out, allow you that extra 2 inches. When you cut it, you're going to fold under the raw edge, and now you're going to tie it right back where the beginning and the tail of the previous ribbon and its tail. Use your chenille stem and tie it into place. You now have your ribbon all about your wreath. Now take and pull the plaid to the front and the wire mesh to the center, and that will fluff it out and give it that natural ruffle effect and billow. And just go all the way around the wreath the same way, and this will give it a nice look and stretch them all out. Pull the plaid to the front, wire to the back, and this is what we have. It looks gorgeous, just like that. Now we're ready to begin making our bow and tying on our elements. Okay, so let's make the bow, and I've got both my ribbons here, and I have the wire. And the way that I do this is a lot of times I will lay it across my wreath and figure out exactly how much I need there. What I do is I look at the width of my wreath and where I'm planning on putting it. I'm going to be putting my bow here on the side, and I just decide how long I want that across, how wide or how large I want that bow to be, and I allow myself at least 1 inch to 2 inches on each side of it. That tells me the length. Now, because I really truly catch mine in the center, if I go ahead and I make that bow just like that, there's the width, 2 inches allowance on each side of that wreath, and take my ribbons and bring them to my fingers right there and allow at least an inch past it. That should give me the exact width of when that bow is spreaded out and made. It's going to hit. Now, if you want to allow yourself a little, just make sure you've got that 1 inch there in the center and it's looped over that 2 inches beyond, because by the time you pull these rings out and fluff it up. Now I'm just going to take and roll out my ribbon the same width, and once again, when I bring it over here to my wreath, I can see that that is 2 inches on each side, and then I will just roll it however many loops I'm planning on having, because this is going to be the smallest of the bow. So if you feel like you just want to recheck it, you can lay it there and you can see if it's at least an inch over on both sides, because each time you roll it, it's going to get just a little bit broader. So once again, I'm going to roll those 2 ribbons out, and that way I've got, let me get this out of the way. Okay, so now I know how wide I want my bow. So that's a single, and then I'm going to roll it around again. And then that way, if you know how many loops you want, if you want 6 loops, if you want 8, and there is 2, and there is 2. So at this point, if you're going to just make 8 loops, because you got 2 ribbons running, and we know this is the halfway point, you can twist this if you want to. It's up to you. Just make sure you go at least beyond, right here's the first fold, and you've got to go here, and that's going to be where you catch it in the center. And if you're going to put tails on it, now my tail is generally the same length as the entire length of this, so that's real easy. If I'm here at the half point, that's double. And then if I brought it back one more time, that would be my length, which is really truly just one roll. So if you wanted to just roll it a single time and then cut it, that'll be your tails. So now you can just go back and roll that one out, stay in that 1 inch there, and now you can go ahead and tie it, and you have your tail, and you can add your other 2 tails. So I'm just going to fold it. That's how I do it. I kind of mash it in and fold it back, and we're going to tie this really tight. You can tie this with string, you can tie it with pipe cleaner, whichever you want, whatever's easy for you, and tie it back here in the back. Now you want to get it pretty tight, but you want to leave a single tie because we're going to add to this, so that make sure it's tight enough that when you are pulling out your loops, and you can do these any way you want, you can put the small out, you're just fluffing it, and just pull your loops out. You'll shape it after you fluff it. Right now we're just doing the fluffing. And since I got the small one inside going out this way, I take this small one out and go this way. Go the opposite way. So I'll grab hold of it, and when I fluff it out, when you get a hold of it, you can fluff it out. Make sure that I've got that going, and I pull this one that away, and I just do the opposite. Then I can fluff this and shape it more once I start working it. So let's add a tail to this. That's real easy. I just basically roll out, and I have the weaved one coming out on top. So naturally, when I roll these out, I'm going to want this mesh one to be on top. And like I said, it's just going to make sure you just lay them the same way, and you're just going to roll them out to a little bit beyond what's already on there, so that they're the same length, because when you match these up, you're going to be tying that tail to the back. So I just stretch it out, and I know that I can go right here because I need at least an inch to where I can tie it on. Well, actually, allow yourself, you want at least 2 inches beyond, and then you're going to snip it. And now I have my tails, so now I can just kind of get a hold of them right there and tie it on to my bundle here, and tie it on. Now, since this pipe cleaner is going to be too shy of tying it on, I would just use another pipe cleaner and put around this whole bundle. So now I can start working on my bow. Now, to make the dovetails, if you will take, I always put the wire towards my dominant hand. So if I am folding that, and that wire is laying there towards my thumb, this is my less dominant hand, and put the wire towards it, and then when you cut, lay that at a complete angle to your end, and when you cut it, you will have this perfect dovetail that will not give you any harassment. And then do the other one the same way. Turn it to where the wire is towards the less dominant hand, lay it at an angle, and cut it. And these are going to have a gap to them. It's just the fact that they are this type of material. So if you really was worried that it was going to show up bad, you could trim it out. And I really don't worry about it. It's not giving me any kind of problems. And then as far as the tails, sometimes I will take and do this. I'll put my fingers like that, and then that way it gives us natural little wave. And so once again, I do this one the same way. I just lay my fingers, and I put an inch in between, and I leave one while I roll up the other. And I come below it, and I roll up this one and leave the other. And depending on how many of those rolls you want in there. So there we go. We have our little wavy bow that's ready for the wreath. So now let's work on adding elements to our wreath. And we'll put our bow aside for now. Now on these elements that I'm going to put onto my wreath, I can probably use my floral wire for this one, and if I use the tree, I can also use a tie for it. Chenille stems, I want them to be, you know, at least 5 inches long. That'll give me enough. And what I do is I just put a little bit of glue with my hot melt right here in the center, and I just make a small line there. Don't take a whole lot. And once I put that chenille stem there, I just put a small line across it, like a continuous bead of glue, and I will do 2 lines across there normally. That way, if I need to turn it or twist it, it'll stay. The barn, I'm going to do the same way. I'm going to go about middle ways. I put a small amount there. You don't need a whole lot to get that chenille stem to stick to it. And then once I got that in place, I will create 2 bead lines across it. And that holds it pretty good. I usually don't have a problem after that. Now I have this arrangement that would have been a centerpiece arrangement that I saved from being thrown away. And you can see it's had a working over. It's been through it, and I want to take these pine cones off and use them. And I also want to use this greenery on other projects, but I thought I'd show you that I'm going to get some pine cones. I have some already that I have collected. I have these, and I'm going to be putting wire on them. But I want to get a few of these. I love these pine cones, and they have a wire that's attaching them. And I could probably get a hold of that another way, but that was just the quickest, most accessible, was I know that that wire is right there in that little mid area, and I can just pull it out from around them and throw it away, and that way I can repurpose these pine cones. And these are just so neat. I love those pine cones. Now, as you can see, I got a pile of pine cones off of that. And these vintage picks, I will definitely be saving those for another project. And the ribbon, you know, it's pretty much wrinkled up. But you can iron that and you can press it out, and it looks just as nice as it did when it was new. But it has some tears in it, so that might have to be used on something else. But nonetheless, this greenery, I am actually going to cut a few of these, and I'm going to put the wreaths on, put a wreath on my tree, and then I'm going to put another on the wood panel truck, station wagon. So on the tree, I'm going to put one, and then here on the panel station wagon, I'm going to put one. And the way I do that wreath, in case no one's ever done this one goes long to narrow, so that's going to work out great. But I just roll it around and bring it back to itself and give it one side a twist so it stays together. And you can trim that, you know, to make it look decent, and trim it down a little bit if you want to, where the fronds are real long. And it just takes a moment. Of course, you get green everywhere where I'm showing you on camera, but normally you would do this over the trash can, so you don't have all these green flying everywhere. And then that way it's trimmed down, and you can glue it right there on the station wagon, just like you see them bought that way. They're already have their wreaths on them. And I generally just, I mean, it just takes a spot of glue to hold it on there, and it really don't take nothing, and they'll stay right there. And then on the tree, same way, if it makes sense. I'll probably have to put this about middle ways. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the internal out and make that a lot easier. I'll just do the outside too. And now when I roll this around to make that little wreath, I can take that smaller end and just push it over top of the lower one. And now it's ready to be glued on. And just a little trim if you need to. Just whatever's necessary to make it look right. And then since that's going to be middle ways, okay, let's let that stay in place. And there we go. Those are ready to go on the wreath. Now, I'm working on these pine cones. I'm going to take my floral wire, and I've just rolled me out some. And I know it's hard to see, but basically I just take and leave myself right much tail. And probably, I don't know, at least 4 inches on each side. And I just run it right in there to where those needles will catch it. Bring it about. I give it a twist on these type, and then that's it. I leave that tail 4 inches more on that side, and now I've got 2 wires running there, and I can tie that on to my wreath. And I'll do, you know, several of the, I'll probably do at least 5 different pine cones on there. And then once again, I'm going to run that wire over to the other side. I'm going to give it a single twist. You can do two if you feel like you need to. And I'm going to cut the tail, and then that way I have these two tails. And it really just takes a minute to do that. And so I'm going to also do this one. It's kind of broken out, but I like it. I really like it, and I think that it will look just as nice. And even though it's got some broken needles and stuff, it's still useful because I took it off of that centerpiece. So I'm just going to run it under those needles there, and that's got enough bare spot that it can go up against its back. And twist that wire around, and I'll make it kind of tight. And then that way I've got plenty of wire to tie that back on. And I'll just put this bare side to the inside of the wreath where no one will even notice it. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to put my pine cones on my wreath. And this one that's the large one that is missing a spot, I have the wires going, you know, it's hollowed out here, but I have the wires going through that area. So I can tie it on, and you're only going to see this side. And this larger one, I think that I want to put it maybe to the inside here and just tie it on in this area. And the great thing is I can adjust it as I need to and just tie it on to my wreath. And I think that'll work great. And basically just work them in where you think they would be best suited, and find the spots where you can kind of pose it. And you don't want to tie it too tight. You want to leave yourself plenty of wire under there so that you can make shifts in it and change it. And I just twist it around, but not too awful tight, because if I tie it on and then up here at the top I make my adjustment, I can actually twist the pine cone itself if I need to make it more snug. And so that just looks really nice peeking out right there. And the other element that's going to be tied on here, I'll put one of those, you know, on here depending on where I want to balance everything. So first I want to get the pine cones on because they're the small detail. And now that I've got that large one in the spot, I can lay everything up here kind of where I think that I want to put it, and just kind of work it out on what I think I want to have. And I know that my bow's going to go there because I'm going to put mine on the side, and then I can decide where to put the pine cones. And I always have to move everything off there. Posing it is the quickest way that you can figure out how everything will look before you tie it into place. That way you have less probability of having to take it off of the wreath. And just pull that through and tie it on. So that's looking pretty handsome. Last but not least, we have to tie the bow on now that we've gotten all the elements attached. And that's pretty simple. What I do is back here on the back where I twisted the tail and added it, I just added a twist tie inside of that. Now I have it long enough, and then this will just stay in place, and then I can just easily attach it to my wreath right where I want it. And that's a simple task. And then I can hang it up. And that's another thing. Don't forget to add a hanger to your wreath. Just add you a chenille stem. That'll keep it nice and tucked and not scratch anything. And then once you get your wreath hung up, you can fluff it real good on your bow and make sure everything is where it needs to be. So we have our wreath made, and this one turned out absolutely beautiful. The mesh has a little bit of gold in it. There's our voluptuous bow. And we have our elements, and this one we put 7 pine cones on it, and it just turned out absolutely gorgeous. Christmas tree, and we added a wreath to it and the panel wagon. So here we are, finished. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone you think would love to make an expensive uptown looking country Christmas wreath for less than $10, and just make it complete. It can be reworked. There's absolutely nothing glued on except for the pipe cleaners on the back of the elements. So this is Elizabeth. Until the next DIY, I'll be crafting, y'all. Merry Christmas.